Hello and welcome to the Memory Card. This week we're wrapping up the game that made me want to do Zelda Month to begin with, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, for the Nintendo Switch. Man, this thing's big. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild came out on March 3rd as the swan song of the Nintendo Wii U and as the triumphant launch of the Nintendo Switch, which has gone on to have a fantastic 2017. The Switch still has until next March, until its first year on the market has really ended, but it seems that this will go down as one of the best first years of a console's lifespan in the history of the industry. And it all started with Breath of the Wild. I remember seeing the 2014 E3 trailer towards the beginning of 2016, after beating Wind Waker HD and truly becoming a Zelda fan. And I was already impressed by the art style and everything that was on display in that trailer. It looked different in comparison to every other Zelda game, so I was eagerly awaiting any other news for Zelda U, as it was known at the time. And when I heard that Nintendo was going to be focusing primarily on Zelda U at E3 2016, I was extremely excited for what they were going to show. And I watched Nintendo's E3 show live streamed on my day off from work, and I could not have prepared myself for the trailer and the gameplay to come. That day, Zelda U became The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and its trailer that year was one of the best trailers I had ever seen for a game. And normally game trailers are big and loud, but that wasn't the case for this one. The music was atmospheric and it set the tone for the game to come. I was immediately floored by the gorgeous art style and music in the game, and I watched the hours of gameplay that was shown on the Treehouse livestream, and I would rewatch those gameplay videos probably over 20 times before the eventual release of the game. And that was strange for me because I had been excited for games before, but never like this. Hyped is an overused word, but even that fails to describe just how much I could not wait for this game. Now, at the time, the Switch was still known as the NX, and I remember thinking that I wouldn't touch the NX until at least 6 months after the release of the console because of how much I loved my Wii U. And what's funny about that is, after the Switch presentation in January, where Nintendo took my breath away with the final trailer for this game, which is my favorite trailer ever for a video game, I was the first in line at my local GameStop on my college's campus to pre-order Breath of the Wild, and the Nintendo Switch as well. And at the time of recording this, I still haven't picked up the Wii U version of the game, even though I do still plan on buying it, mostly for the sake of my collection. Even though this game was released as the final Wii U game from Nintendo, much in the same way that Twilight Princess was for the GameCube, and also the triumphant beginning of the Wii's lifespan, Breath of the Wild feels much more indicative of the era of the Nintendo Switch than the Wii U. Now when it comes to performance, there's not a whole lot of difference between the two versions, other than like stuff with the UI, but it's the essence of this game that makes this much more of a Switch game than a Wii U game. Breath of the Wild is about unbridled freedom, and no other console has coincided with that message more than the Nintendo Switch. And being able to take this game from my dorm room to the hallways outside my classes was absolutely mind-blowing to me in college. And with the Wii U's library, a lot of the games were typically smaller experiences, a bit more casual and pick up and play, with some notable exceptions. Games like Super Mario 3D World fit the Wii U's library much better than Breath of the Wild. This game feels much more like the beginning of the renaissance that Nintendo is currently going with its rapid releases and brand new IP out of nowhere like ARMS, and bringing back things to the 3D roots of Mario with Mario Odyssey. And also part of the message of the Switch so far has been able to take big console experiences with you wherever you go. And Breath of the Wild was definitely a great way to set off that message. Breath of the Wild could not have come out at a better time in my life. I was in the middle of my final semester of college, and I was about to go out into the real world and face a lot of uncertainty, and Link was about to do the same in this game. Breath of the Wild not only helped me escape from the stress of the final semester of college, but the job search as well. And when I was scared and stressed out, there was always the vast, beautiful world of Hyrule to go to. And I had never seen such a 3D world that was so beautifully and fully realized in a video game. And after playing Breath of the Wild, it's hard to go back to any other open world game because now I feel so limited in those games. Being able to climb any mountain, tree, or building in this game and glide across open fields is one of the most beautiful and liberating experiences I've ever had in a game. And since this game has come out, Nintendo has shown the industry how you make an open world game to the point where just about every other open world game before this game and since kind of feels like they weren't even trying. Nintendo showed the industry how to make a 2D platformer with Super Mario Bros. On the NES, and how to make a 3D platformer with Mario 64, and how to do third-person combat in a 3D game with Ocarina of Time, both on the Nintendo 64. And now, they've shown the industry how you make an open-world game with Breath of the Wild. Around every corner is a new surprise and a moment of joy punctuated by moments of serenity in the vast open expanse of this lush world. And that's one of the key things about this game. This game is full of surprises all over the place, and one of the best decisions they made with this game is that the map isn't just cluttered with icons the moment you go into a new area or climb a tower or anything like that, like you do in most Ubisoft open world games. Most markers in this game are put there because of you. And whenever you see a location, you're the one that puts that location on the map. And that makes it to where the map just doesn't get cluttered and just barely able to be read, really. That happens a lot of the times in those Ubisoft open world games that still hasn't really been dealt with. And that's just one of the many really great aspects of the design of this game. Now, a lot of games make the mistake of making the opening of the game too linear and boring as a result. It just becomes one long, drawn-out tutorial. Twilight Princess and Skyrim are definitely guilty of this. In Breath of the Wild, the opening of the game is a natural tutorial, and you get to discover the way the game works on your own, and it is so satisfying and fun. The game really, it just feels like the game respects you and your intelligence. And you could spend hours in the opening of the game, the Great Plateau, or about a half an hour, it's up to you, and you could spend hundreds of hours doing everything possible in Hyrule, or just run straight to Ganon from the outset of the game and have the fight of your life on your hands. This game is freedom like no other game has ever been able to accomplish. Even though much of the story is optional, and it's still fantastic. There are great characters from the past and present, and one other daring shakeup for the franchise is that there's actual voice acting in the dialogue in this game. Majora's Mask used to be the most daring and experimental Zelda game until this came out. Breath of the Wild is both the freshest Zelda game ever made, and yet also everything amazing about Zelda games all wrapped up together. There are over 100 shrines alongside the main dungeons for those who love the puzzle solving and dungeon crawling in this game, alongside all the many little puzzles throughout the land of Hyrule. But there's also the best open world ever put in a game for those who love the exploration in Zelda games. And there's also an insane amount of variety in the weapons and armor and possibility for combat for those who love the fighting in Zelda games. And there's also a great story that's told in a unique way for the franchise, and the best incarnation of Princess Zelda. For those of us who love the story in Zelda games, in case you're watching this and haven't played this amazing game yet, I won't spoil anything, but this version of Princess Zelda is the most nuanced, human, and relatable Zelda has ever been. And she's part of what makes this story so great. There have been complaints leveled at this game since its release, mostly focusing on the weather system and the weapons breaking. And the weather acts very realistically in Breath of the Wild. If you have metal weapons equipped in the middle of a lightning storm, you're probably going to get struck. But you can also use that to your advantage, because if you have some metal weapon that's about to break anyway, you can just throw it at your enemy and they'll get struck and do extra damage. And also, if it's raining while you're trying to climb a mountain, it's probably not going to work out well. And honestly, it took about 175 hours of game time before the rain started to bother me at all. And even by then, I had ways to work around that. And the weapon durability has also been a point of contention, but that never bothered me too much because it got me to have much more variety in the kinds of weapons that I would use in the game. Otherwise, I probably would have just used swords and been done with that, but the weapon degradation just got me to change things up a lot and got to discover a lot of cool new ways to deal with combat. And also there's just many ways to approach the combat in this game that you can basically always find a way that works out for you. And another point of contention has been the music, because typically in Zelda games the music has been big and anthemic, and it's like that in times in Breath of the Wild, mostly in certain cutscenes, but for most of the game, the music is much more subdued and atmospheric. It reminds me of the opening of Super Mario 64, where when you first are introduced to the game and you're out in the area right outside Peach's castle, there's not really any music, it's just the sounds of nature. And that's to help make sure that the music doesn't get in the way of the experience of being in that 3D world for the first time. And that's kind of the way it is with Breath of the Wild, where the focus is on the world itself as well. Now, there are times where I missed that big anthemic music, but thankfully there was the cutscenes there that helped bring that music back. And there's also a lot of really fun touches within the music, like where you hear melodies that you remember from past Zelda games, but they're done in a slightly different way. Maybe it's slower, maybe the instrumentation is different, but it's always a treat every time. Before Breath of the Wild came out, Eiji Aonuma made a big fuss about how he was doing story different with Breath of the Wild, and had this idea in his head for the past 20 years or so, and it's definitely interesting how it's implemented, and I like how it's implemented. It's done in a way to where if you don't want to go into the story all that much and you just want to explore the world and then fight Ganon, that's there for you, so you can experience as much or as little of the story as you want. And for those of you that want that story, there's a great story there for you. Breath of the Wild is a special once-in-a-generation kind of game. I used to be envious of the kids that got to play Ocarina of Time when it first came out in 1998 because of how mind-blowing that experience must have been. But I don't feel that way anymore because of Breath of the Wild. When I first saw the gorgeous expanse of Hyrule, when I played this game for the first time the night I picked up my special edition of the game and my Switch, I actually teared up a bit. I had never been so excited for a game in my life, and this game not only lived up to all of my hopes, but exceeded them more than I ever could have imagined. Since I was a kid, Star Wars Knights of the Republic was always my favorite game of all time, and I never thought anything could top it. Even though the Mass Effect trilogy came close. And it took me a few months to realize it because I didn't want it to be true that it could ever be topped, but The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is the best game I have ever played. This game has raised the standard for the entire industry, and I'll honestly be shocked if another game even matches the sheer brilliance of Breath of the Wild. I hope you weren't expecting a negative review of this game because Breath of the Wild is what cemented the Legend of Zelda franchise as my favorite game series ever made. There have been fantastic games made before this, like The Witcher 3 and Okami, Star Wars Knights of the Republic, and the Mass Effect trilogy, but this game just raises the bar in ways that rarely ever happens in the industry, and I'll honestly be shocked if any game ever comes close to matching the masterpiece that this game is. I could not recommend this game highly enough. I recommend this game higher than basically any game I've ever played. This game is just about as perfect as a game has ever been. But regardless, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on the memory card.